Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for tuning in to the very first episode of Autism Life Hacks podcast, hosted by Shawnee and Terrence Eskridge. I am so excited that you all have tuned in to our very first episode. This is our family podcast exclusively available here on Patreon, and you have just tuned in to the first of a two-part introduction series. The introduction series is free to you, and we hope that what you'll do is get to know us a little, share this series with two of your friends and family members who need the support, and then come back to Patreon and partner with us by subscribing to the podcast tier. So, to get into this first half of the intro, I wanted to take the time to introduce myself. I know a lot of friends and family are listening. I thank you very, very much. But for those of you who don't really know me or only know me in passing, I am Shawnee Eskridge. I'm a certified faith-based clinical therapist. I'm a minister. I'm a volunteer at the Memphis Crisis Center. I'm a master's degree student at North Central University. I am currently on the Parent Advisory Council for Shelby County Schools, the Department of Exceptional Children. They service our special needs children throughout the school district. I'm also a wife and a mother. And my family consists of my husband, Terrence, who you'll meet in tomorrow's episode, and our two beautiful daughters. Our testimony and a little bit of our backstory, without going too deep into it because I don't want to step on Terrence's intro, is that our oldest daughter was diagnosed as autistic at the age of 4. And in short, after she was diagnosed, her diagnosis led us to get Terrence's diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome 1 year later. And so now we are a family of 4, and we are learning more about life on the spectrum every single day from every angle, from parenting, marriage, sibling relationships, extended family and friends acceptance, therapy, advocacy, community support, church life, and spiritual relationships. You name it, we're finding out what works for our family. And as we find out the things that work for our family, we've come to call these our life hacks. So, the inspiration for why we wanted to start this podcast, it started with a trend that I was noticing in one of the support groups I'm in on social media. And the support group is for local moms of children with special needs. So it's not just autism, it's the whole gambit of special needs. And for the most part, we're usually on the same page. We're supportive of each other, and we provide each other with a safe place to vent without judgment. And when we have the resources, we share those resources with each other. So I am supported by a strong, strong community of mothers just in my city alone. And I'm very, very grateful to know them or be getting to know them. But sometimes there are moments in the group where I see parents at their wits' end about the issues that were not such a big deal in my home anymore. And it made me question why our household had made certain strides in areas where other families still struggled. And in those moments, I always wanted to share what we did to make difficult moments work in our favor in our household. One of the moments I saw the most frustration from my fellow moms was in their feedback about our school system. Specifically, the most overwhelming feedback was that our teachers either don't know how to teach or treat our kids, or that our teachers don't have the resources to meet the needs of our children. So I posed a question at the end of last year in my group about what could we do to bridge the gap between the school system and the parents. And And it was from that post that one of the members actually replied in the comment section about the parent advisory meetings that the school district host every 2 weeks or so. And this member was already on the advisory council and stated that a lot of the grievances in the group could be addressed at those meetings. The problem was that parent turnout was low to non-existent. And I decided in that moment that that wouldn't be me. I wouldn't sit back and just be ignorant any longer and have issues and not say anything or just not be educated about what I needed for my daughter. And so I started attending the meetings this school year, so as of January 2019. And between those meetings and the community of teachers that I'm very blessed to know, even our daughter's godmother is a special needs educator from Sumner County, Tennessee. I keep in constant communication with her. And so in getting to know other teachers and the community of teachers I have on my side, I have been able to see both sides of the bridge. I can see where parents are coming from. I can also see where teachers are coming from. So some of the issues teachers and parents agree on, and other issues I have seen hard lines drawn in the sand. But the position that I've taken has been to share whatever I learn in those meetings with the group. And then I saw that this is happening in multiple areas of my life. Even the advice I gave before joining the advisory council came from things that I learned from other therapists, other advocates, teachers, chiropractors, even YouTube craft videos. So then I started being asked to advocate for other children. One of my very close friends called me and she said, because she's a social worker and she has to work with at-risk youth. And she asked me, she says, Shawnee, some of these kids, it's not that they're bad, it's that they don't have the right guidance, they don't have the right people on their team, and it's not even that they have bad parents, they just have parents who don't know what to do, and they're just trying to make it from day to day. And she asked me, she said, could you do what you've done for your daughter? Could you do that with somebody else's kid? And so I started researching, and I found out that I had to complete my master's degree program in order to be able to do that under insurance. And that was important because a lot of the reason parents don't have advocates is because paying for advocates out of pocket can be expensive. And then I've talked to other advocates, and advocates have told me they don't get paid enough by insurance. And so I knew that that was going to take a while for me to finish my master's. And I really just felt like there should be something we could do to help parents and families right now. And my thought is we either have the resources or have had the resources, or we are willing to find the resource. And in the case of this podcast, we're willing to be the resource. So I called a family meeting and I asked who wanted to do a podcast. And my husband was skeptical at first, but our girls agreed immediately. And that is where Autism Life Hacks, the podcast, was born. So we want to share with you. And not only do we want to share with you, we want to interact with you all. But that is the origin story, I guess, for Autism Life Hacks, the podcast. You have been listening to the Autism Life Hacks podcast. If today's episode has provided a resource or support for you and your family, please leave us a review on your podcast listening platform. This helps us by shining a light for others to see. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to our $5 tier on Patreon to receive even more resources and bonus content even before it goes public. Advice, tips, and support from the professionals you need to reach and from families who understand your experience. For only $5 a month, You can't beat that anywhere. So join the Life Hacks podcast today. Now, back to the episode. So, we've been working on this podcast over the entire summer of 2019. I cannot tell you guys how many test episodes and draft episodes we have in the can, and you'll hear some of the content from those episodes as we get to the subject matter. But we worked really, really hard trying to create the perfect format that works best for our family, but also for yours. We all know that human perfection is a myth, but I still tried to get it as close to perfect as possible. And I just felt that this podcast could not wait any longer. The closer we got back to starting school this semester, you guys, the more heartbreaking the horror stories and the posts on social media became. And it was heartbreaking because I see so many of us that are fearful and full of anxiety, myself included, about our kids and their well-being outside of our eyesight. And so I'm not one who likes to stay in a fearful place too long. I like moving towards solutions. And in a special needs family, that can be really, really hard to feel like there are solutions because there are no medical cures for autism. There are no medical cures for Asperger's or cerebral palsy or Down syndrome. And so oftentimes to hear somebody say, well, I'm a parent of a special needs child and I'm very solution based. I, I've been in situations where I've gotten a side eye, like, okay, well, what is it? And so I just know that I wanted to know that I equipped, empowered, and connected my family and friends to the right resources for them. There may not be medical cures, but there are resources to make your life easier. And so in this podcast, my family and I are going to share with you every method, therapy, prayer, scripture, philosophy, as well as the professionals and support people who have helped us find our life hacks. We're going to teach you how to build your toolbox, some literal and some metaphorical, and to fill them with your go-to strategies, examples, and resources for situations we all face living on the spectrum or in it. Because you may not have Asperger's, you may not be autistic, you may not have Down syndrome, but maybe you know someone who is. Maybe you've met a kid who is living on the spectrum. And while they're living on the spectrum, your interactions with them means you're living in their spectrum. And so we want to make sure that everyone has a resource and everyone has a full toolbox. And each episode will aim to give you 3 components for your toolbox: the tool, when the tool is needed, and how to appropriately use the tool. So while autism may not have a medical cure, this is the podcast where we want to offer hope, resources, and support. Okay, so now that you know who I am and what inspired the podcast, what we aspire to do, I hope that you guys will tune in for the next intro episode, which is with my husband, Terrence Eskridge. We hope that you will share this episode with 2 friends and family members and then partner with us by subscribing to this tier. Share this episode now, okay? Because you don't want to miss the next episode where I interview Terrence. He's going to introduce himself. He's going to answer some audience questions, which I've already been collecting. But if you're hearing this for the first time and you have additional questions, you can private message me over Facebook, Instagram, or even email me directly. Some of you have my telephone number. Just shoot me your questions and I will try to get them in there as the future episodes come up. And so he's going to be answering some audience questions about life on the spectrum, undiagnosed and after diagnosis. He's going to talk about marriage and he's going to talk about parenthood on the spectrum. His story is truly amazing to me because it speaks to what is truly possible for children when we don't treat them like their diagnosis and when we don't limit them to their diagnosis. Terrence is truly doing everything most parents are told our children will not be independent enough to do, and I can't wait for Terrence to share that with you all. Thank you for listening to the very first episode of the Autism Life Hacks podcast.